I'm Reuben. I'm the CEO of Zcoin. We are primarily a privacy coin, so that means we provide privacy on the blockchain. But I'm not actually here today to talk about our privacy protocol or things like that. We are talking about a real use case of blockchain e-voting, and we believe it's the first sort of large-scale sort of usage of e-voting, and kind of like touching on voter privacy as well. Now, this was a really sort of interesting sort of use case, and our founder, his name is Paramin, and he's based in Thailand. He comes from, he has like a computer security background. He actually served in Thailand as a, cyber warfare operative. So he kind of knows his stuff. And it was really interesting because the Thai Democrat Party, for those of you who don't know, Thailand is currently under the rule of a military junta. And they're now just recently, preparing for the new round of elections, which has been kind of delayed for a long time. And the Thai Democrat Party is actually the oldest political party in Thailand. They have about 2.5 million registered members. And the guy there in the middle is Abhisit, who was a former Thai prime minister, but in recent years they've kind of lost favor because the Thaksin's party has been more in touch with the guys, the rural people, and Abhisit's seen as like Western educated and kind of out of touch with the regular Thai guy. So in a kind of like interesting type of situation, Abhisit kind of knew that he had to show that the Thai Democrat Party is no longer this really old, stodgy party, and wanted to show that it was truly democratic. And he had the idea of having the first primary election for the party leader. And traditionally, what usually happens is only like members of parliament who are in the Thai Democrat Party and a select few could decide who could be the party leader of the Thai Democrat Party. And he was taking a big risk because he was the incumbent and he was already, set to be the next, still the leader for the Thai Democrat Party, but he felt that he needed to revive it, and therefore he had this idea of a primary election. So let's just this is just like, taken from a news website. These were the three candidates. And so Abhisit is the incumbent and the favorite. He was prime minister and has been, the party leader for a very long time. Dr. Warong, so the guy in the center, he's seen as the main challenger, and he's actually also seen as perhaps a bit too favorable to the military junta. He kind of came out of nowhere, backed by the military junta. So some people see it as a way for the military junta to sort of influence the Democrat Party. And for those of you who don't know, the military sort of caretaker government was just meant to be a caretaker government, but now that their mandate is running out, they seem to be still keen to hold on to power. So this is quite a really interesting type of situation. Alon Khan was just, he's just there to split the vote, I suppose, but he was never a serious challenger. And so, what are the challenges of e-voting? There are many experts that actually believe that, there's no perfect way to do e-voting, especially if you're talking on the nationwide scale. And there are particular issues of e-voting. Okay, voter eligibility, whether the person is eligible to vote. Is he actually voting or someone else voting on his behalf? Something else also called verification of hardware and software. If you have hardware, how do you know when I'm pressing person B is actually recording the person B? How do I know there's no software backdoors? And the storage of votes. Once I have recorded the vote, how do I make sure that they are not interfered with? And this is actually where blockchain is very suited because, as everyone knows, so everything you put on the blockchain can't be altered. Is what we call immutability. And the last one, which is voter anonymity. You want to make sure that when you vote, you don't know who this person actually voted for. And these are really important problems. Not all of them are solved by blockchain, and especially in this particular case, we see many deficiencies in e-voting. And it was only, I would say that, the usage of the blockchain here was suitable because of the really interesting use case, like circumstances that surround it. So before I even go into that, like I was talking about, who didn't trust each other. And originally, the whole idea, this e-voting thing, Zcoin, when like the blockchain technology came in at a very, very late stage because they were already developing this software for quite a long time. And then suddenly, all the candidates were saying, I don't trust anybody to maintain this database of the votes, right? And what happened was, you have a centralized server that stores the votes. How do I know that that's not being tampered with? And this was really, really late in the game. This was like maybe 2 to 3 months before the election, and none of the software was actually set for blockchain. But suddenly all these guys saying like, if you don't solve this problem, we're not gonna go do this e-voting and we're gonna make this a problem. But what happened was when Paramin, our founder, he was brought in as originally a cybersecurity advisor, but then he was like, oh, what about blockchain? And everyone, all the IT experts for each of the candidates have heard of blockchain. So it's a really good, like people know at least of the basic characteristics in blockchain, and they were willing to try it out. And that's how, we came in as a, sort of like a solutions provider, right? And because of this sort of great distrust between the candidates, they didn't even trust the Thai Democrat Party Electoral Commission because they also believed they could have been potentially compromised, and they were particularly concerned about the storage of the votes. So let's talk about voter eligibility and how the very, very basic ways they have done sort of to sort of make sure that voters are eligible to vote. So there are 2 ways to vote. One which is through Raspberry Pi devices, and the other the polling stations nationwide. And there's also a mobile app with photo ID verification, where if you take your mobile app, you have to enter in your national ID, you have to take a photo with you with the national ID, and that's of course cross-checked with the Democrat Party member database. And of course, when you're talking about, maybe 100,000 people, maybe there was manual checking, which was horrible. And of course, because of the shortness of time, there was no ability to, include additional AI facial verification checks. That's of course something that can be improved on. And there's also so many question marks as to, how secure is the mobile app and things like that, which we will talk about here. So a Raspberry Pi was, chosen to be sort of the choice of device at the polling stations, and everyone who has a Raspberry Pi knows that the entire software is just loaded through an SD card slot, and obviously not ideal. And we actually proposed, why didn't you use some sort of tamper-proof glue? And the Democrat Party said, no, we want to reuse this in the future. So they had to compromise and have some sort of tamper seals. Not ideal. And basically all the software was open source and also vetted by all the candidate IT experts and loaded onto the Raspberry Pi in the presence of all the representatives. Of course, maybe not a perfect solution. The mobile app as well was, of course, all the code was open, and basically what they did was when they uploaded the Play Store on iOS, they made sure that once that's there, as long as you didn't update the app again, then there's no sort of change in the software. These are very, very basic type of security, which is probably not ready for national election right yet, but this was the stuff that was done. So let's talk about storage of block votes and blockchain and IPF as in general. And blockchain is always seen as a suitable storage, but it only can store very small amounts of data. And for example, people were uploading the photo ID. You're not going to store the whole entire photo on the Zcoin's blockchain. That's not what it's used for. And IPFS is the interplanetary file system. It's a decentralized file storage. Whatever file you upload, has a hash. The address cannot be changed because it's tied to the hash. But you still need the database to tie all the individual entries together, and that's where blockchain comes in. So IPFS actually stores the encrypted voter ID and the vote itself, but the blockchain serves as the database to enter it in. So voter anonymity was a very important factor here, and this was a real issue because ideally we would want to use something like zero-knowledge proofs where you can, verify that the person. Oops, am I out of time? Okay, that you can verify that the vote has happened, but not which way he has voted. But what happened was that the Democrat Party, EC, were not confident in this. They wanted the ability to audit the votes. And how do you prevent that from having the Thai, the EC have full ability to see who voted for who? And we use something called Shamir secret sharing, where the voter ID so it was split into two, the voter ID, identification data, and the votes themselves. So the voter ID could be opened by the Democrat Party EC or the Democrat Party senior member, but the votes themselves, they have to have all the candidates agree to open it and together with the EC and the senior member. And this was actually really, really risky. I mean, we told them for the votes, at least have it 3 out of 5. For some reason, the EC at the very last minute said we wanted 5 out of 5, and we were scared to death because what happens if somebody doesn't want the vote to proceed? They just lose their key and oh crap, we can't open the votes. And this is a real seat by your pants type of sort of situation. And we really, really wanted them to go 3 out of 5, but we were overruled. And basically they did 5 out of 5, but luckily no such problems exist. And that's why we didn't publicize this whole thing until the vote were completed, because we were really worried that some crap would have happened. So obviously, zero-knowledge proof systems may be used in the future, but right now, the EC were not comfortable. But hopefully, with this first round, they will, probably be more open to using privacy systems. Are we ready for national elections yet? We probably manage challenges to overcome, especially, in verifying that votes are being recorded correctly. Obviously, there were some ways that we did do to mitigate as much as we can, but they're not perfect. And they should be cryptographic ways for users to check if the vote has been tampered with. And this has to be done in such a way where the proof does not show which way you have voted, which is really, really important, because in voter buying, if I want to buy votes, you can just show me that receipt that you voted a certain way. But if I just say, okay, I have this receipt that I voted and I know it's not been tampered with, then at least, I retain the same sort of protections as paper ballots. And it's also, e-voting is also not suitable for areas where voter intimidation is a problem. So if you're in a remote village, I get all these people to have their mobile phones and I just brute force them into voting a certain way. Obviously in cities, this is much harder. But at polling stations, that would be, of course, much harder. But if you're just allowing through mobile apps in small, discrete communities, this is a real problem as well. So, blockchain or e-voting has many, many challenges. But yet, despite the challenges, there are really, really, many, many benefits for e-voting. And there are certain use cases where e-voting has really, really comes to the fore. So a great use case for polling or referendum. So the Thai Democrat Party has actually said, look, beyond the party elections, they want to use this system to, directly engage with their members and gauge opinions of certain key issues. So, we have to have a degree of security there, but, the risk level is not so high. It has lower cost and fast tallying because you can do this, without people on the ground. And it was, the entire voting process was done in a couple of hours. And especially increased voter participation. A lot of younger voters just want to stay at home and just click a button. And this is really important in this day and age. But what we're saying here is that there are different threat profiles, need different solutions. Blockchain does solve one part of the storage, but e-voting has ways to go to full-scale national elections. But for many sort of lower risk cases, blockchain and e-voting are really good at this type of things. I better wrap up. So just some photos of us doing this in action. Oops. So we appear in the news, and interestingly, on the converse, someone there was this rap video against the Thai government saying basically the military junta sucks, and someone used this technology on the converse to upload this video against the Thai government on our blockchain and use our privacy technology so that you couldn't really tell where this coin came from, which I thought was quite interesting. And on one hand, we're helping government. On the other hand, we're screw the government, right? So, but this is not done by us. just to show that blockchain is neutral, right? Yeah. So yeah, thank you. So that's basically it.
Thank you very much, Reuben. I think we can make some time for a couple of questions, just really quickly.
Hello. See, when you started the implementation, just wanted to understand what are the 3 top problems that you faced when you were implementing this, when you were trying to productionize?
I would say the major problem was making these people who never had understanding of e-voting technology, use the paper ballots to be actually understanding the technology. So for example, like the Shamir secret sharing, the Democrat Party EC were like, oh, you should give us all the backups. And we're like, if you do the backups, you don't need to do the secret sharing type of stuff. So he has like walking through the process and making them comfortable. On top of that, it was very, very difficult to actually, everyone was putting in their thoughts like very, very last minute. And even when we were auditing the mobile app, so we saw so many vulnerabilities in very, very short time. I think we were brought in at a very late stage. I think the last one was that the actual like on the ground implementation. The people may not be the most trained. So one of the things that it was actually, this vote was only supposed to last for 5 days, from the 1st of November to the 5th of November. But what happened was a really embarrassing thing. Nothing to do with us, but it was still really embarrassing, was when they were loading the Raspberry Pis, some of the Raspberry Pis they forgot to set the time zone. So it was set to GMT plus 00. So when all these guys went to the polling station, they're like, why isn't it unlocked? Why can't we vote? It was like really amateur mistakes. And it just shows like, there's a cluster F, right? And then they had to extend the voting period until the 9th, so those areas could actually vote. I mean, these are practical issues, both on the political will side and actually the practical implementation. Or you can have all this cryptographic stuff, but people are still the weakest link. Yeah.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. You know how in advertising you can fake clicks, right? So I was wondering how you assure that only registered voters vote. Do you maintain a private blockchain or in some other way control who can vote?
So obviously, there were 2 ways to vote. Of course, through the polling stations where they had to show their national ID and it's cross-checked with their own database to make sure they are a registered voter. For the mobile app, that's of course more challenging. That's why they had to upload both a national ID and also a photo of themselves with it. So, at least it's a person. It's kind of like an exchange, exchange type of KYC. And that national ID vote is, of course, cross-checked with the Democrat Party member voting. So, I mean, that's like a basic level they had to be registered. They actually had to take a photo of themselves with the national ID. Of course, there are ways to automate this, but I guess that's the basic level of protection we have.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm curious about if this case of voting came to you guys by coincidence and then you saw the opportunity and you work on there and you had a lot of learnings. And if it was by coincidence, I'm curious about if the fact that if you are planning to be focused on this field as a company and what's the business plan that you have now. Thank you.
I mean, honestly, we are still a privacy coin. The way we were brought in was because, Parmin, he's been like seen as a leader in the space of blockchain and also like with cybersecurity. And he was actually originally just brought in as a cybersecurity advisor, nothing to do with blockchain. But when all these parties were like arguing about, who should control the centralized server, he proposed it then and all the parties agreed, and that's how Zcoin came in. Of course, we saw it as an opportunity to showcase more of like what our team can do and the potentials of blockchain technology, and we also wanted to show people that Zcoin is not anti-government. We have, I think that's like changing the narrative, not just about money laundering and whatnot. Of course, they did say that we'll continue working with us. That's because they plan not just to use this system once, but in the future. And of course, we have ways that we want to improve the process, because obviously this was not ideal. I mean, I wouldn't say that's our main focus. We will assist them when we can, but the idea is that, look, now we have a real use case, we can improve a bit and actually show it to other places. They are now maybe have more guts to implement such systems, especially maybe at lower risk levels. And yeah, I guess that answers the question.
Yeah, I think we'll take the last question.
Hi. Wonderful use case. I think this is sort of the holy grail, I think, in many ways, if you can enable voting on a big scale. I read an interesting paper, and maybe you're familiar with it, on Medium about some of the problems on voting and why, according to this particular author, it was quote-unquote impossible. One of the problems is the bugs in the code itself, and supposedly that's not solvable, and if you can even audit somehow the code, the compiler can always have some embedded issues that would prevent it, and the author's main point was that without a physical paper which you can then audit, there's no way to do it. Would you mind addressing how, as you're familiar with this article, how your technology can solve the underlying issues that are raised?
As I mentioned, I don't think blockchain solves every one of these issues. Like, as I said, blockchain only solves one component, which is the storage. Of course, when we talk about with software verification, about compilers, there are ways to compile software deterministically where you can prove that the binary came from the source code, so I don't think that's so much of a problem. How is it loaded into the hardware? That's, of course, an issue. Whether the hardware has any backdoors, that's not solved by blockchain, obviously. There may be ways to do this in the future. But what I'm saying here is that for certain elections, you don't need all of this. And like, if I just wanted to poll my members, or like my Thai Democrat Party members, what do you think of this? I don't need that level of security. It takes so much effort to compromise like hardware systems. You really have to go deep, like, state level type of stuff to infiltrate hardware companies to build in backdoors, right? And maybe of course, when you're talking about like America elections where Russia and all this type of things, of course, in those cases, maybe e-voting isn't a great use case. But how about if I just want to get, okay, what's your opinion of this fundamental issue? I want your thoughts on this. And that's where I would say e-voting really has a real use case there. There may be technologies developed in the future that address these concerns. I do believe that, we shouldn't be defeatist and say, oh yeah, we can't have a perfect system. I mean, paper ballot systems are not perfect either. I mean, I come from Malaysia. There's like blackouts, ballot boxes disappear and new ballot boxes come in. Is that ideal? No, and yet we still use it. There's no perfect system, but it's about the risk level, and that's why I say we shouldn't just abandon this. There are many, many nationwide use cases of this, and I would say polling, opinion things, and maybe at one point in the future we'll be ready for national elections.